You're just a cutie.
From you. What's his name? What's his name?
They cleaned up in there, cleaned up all over.
Oh, I have to go through the
How are you on this day?
Very good. How are you?
Doing good.
Woke up again. Wiley, we can't see that.
I can sit anywhere. There will be more coffee in about
hours.
Yeah, about a minute.
Just remember, Joanne's making that batch.
Does that mean it's stronger?
No, you just don't know what you're going to end up with.
My coffee has been described as jet fuel, so
This is thick.
I know I love this morning.
Oh, yeah.
What it was really crazy.
Cold. Cold and wet.
And then it graduated into small little.
Happy Mother's Day to all of you. It's amazing sometimes. I want to start this way. As we think today, and we'll be focusing on the elements of just war today. I want you to kind of stick in the back of your mind, what if you were about or thinking about having or feeling that you must have a big argument with your wife, your husband, your mother, your father, your brother, your sister, or your neighbor. What I'm suggesting to you, and we'll, I hope, get to this next week, is that this understanding of when and how we fight is not only or even primarily applicable to nations. It is applicable to us when we are the decision makers that have to decide whether to go to war. And I'm using war in quotes. Now, just so happens that in today's Asheville paper, some articles that directly pertain, a loved one owes you some money, now what? It is a perfect application of just war theory. And I won't go into that right now. The last piece is, or the last two sentences, two or three paragraphs is, if as a last resort, take legal action. And then it talks about the problems with legal action. But it's a really interesting article when you put the just war glasses on. Also, threat, and I'm not advocating the position these authors are taking. Threat to abortion rights really started with Sanders. It's worth reading. Sorry.
You're important, Wiley.
The third one is even more relevant. A letter to Putin. Dear President Putin, it's wise to learn from mistakes in the history of your own country, but it's genius to learn from the mistakes of others. The problem with exaggeration, the problem with bombs, the problem with little countries, the problem with citizens, the problem with escalation. And he goes on. This is by Tom Resenfield. 3 articles in 5 pages on a local paper applying just war understandings to personal life and national life. I just give you that. Now, you have in front of you what I promised I would give you. What I would give you last week, which is the scripture passages that you cited in support of the 3 Christian positions on war: pacifism, just war, and crusade. This is by no means all of the biblical passages. And I would point out something that Heath and Anthony and several others did yesterday. If you're interested, find the Interpreter's Dictionary of the Bible on the shelf. It's a 5-volume set. And look up war, wars, peace, and any other way that you would like. And there are Strong's Dictionary of the Bible is in there. There are a lot of dictionaries of the Bible that can help you with that if you want. Suffice it to say today that the pacifist position, the just war position, and the crusade position all find backing in particular passages of Scripture in the Bible. So you can't take the Bible and say the Bible says pacifism is the way, or just war is the way, or crusade, and certainly not that crusade is the way. Now, as I mentioned to you last time, just at the end, and some of you may have missed it, most of the time, when we talk about just war, we're concentrating, the average person tends to concentrate on this one. The just reason for war. When is it necessary, right, good, permissible, you use your word, to go to war. But people who have thought about this a lot, from 300 BC up through 1400, 1600, and even Vatican II, tell us that there are 3 phases that we must consider. And this is as important in your personal understanding of when you go to war and how you go to war and what your objectives are, as it is for nations. It's really important to say not only what are the just reasons to go to war and what are not just reasons for war, but also once you decide how do you conduct the war. This is the war with your relative that owes you money. The war with your wife over where to put the toilet paper. Whatever. And it's also very important to consider how you conduct yourself after hostilities. After hostilities. These articles will help you with that. Now, of course, the thinkers had to put it in Latin. Just bellum, just in bello, in the midst of, and just post bello, after hostilities. They had to do that. But this is what we're talking about. These are circular. Both ways. If you don't conduct yourself properly after hostilities with regard to the people that you have been at war with, you do not have a just war. If you do not conduct the war justly, you do not have a just war. If you do not go to war for the right reasons and excluding the wrong reasons, you do not have a just war. It's one of those charts where it says, did you do this, then go here. If you did not, go back. Well, each place you go back. So you could do this also. All right, as we think, remember this always applies. This always applies to just war understanding. Now, how many of you were not here last week? 1, 2, 3. Okay, I'm going to give you a real bumper sticker of last week.
You weren't here
The week before.
Huh?
You weren't here either.
I'm sorry. Week before last.
Oh,
Well done.
Week before last. the key question that we're dealing with, and this is critical, how do Christians witness to God's love and justice even in the midst of war? That's the topic one, the overarching question. The Easter egg dye in the vinegar that colors everything. We said that humanity has been dealing with this literally almost as long as humans have fought one another. And
She wanted you to say it again about the Easter egg guy? No, about how Christians, you started the very first statement.
how do Christians witness to God's love and justice even in the midst of war? Jesus has two commandments about other people which trump, no terms, pun intended, everything. Love your neighbor. And then he says, the hardest one, love your enemy. How are we faithful to Jesus in the midst of war? Okay? Now, Cicero argued that the universe is governed by natural law, and according to this natural law, unprovoked wars are unjust. Now, Roman law didn't adopt Cicero's advice, but before Cicero, Aristotle was the first person to use the phrase just war. This is not simply a Christian understanding. Muhammad was very clear about the conditions under which to go to war and said you did not attack Christians and Jews unless they interfered with the governance and the practice of the faith. It isn't that they had a different faith, that we had a different faith. It was that we would seek, and the Jews in Medina did do this, and the Christians, to overturn the rule of the constituted authorities. That was a reason to go to war. So this isn't only Christian, and that's important. But Ambrose and then Augustine and more after them really got serious about how do we deal with war. We are now responsible, we Christians, basically for the whole Roman Empire. We can't just say, don't do it. We've got to figure out how to address this issue of war. Now, we said we're not going to pay a lot of any attention except as sidelights to pacifism and the crusade. The crusade, for every Christian thinker that I know anything about, and most secular, or almost all secular thinkers, is out. You don't go to war to advance your faith. That is a no-no. That destroys just war. but you may not use war as an instrument of conversion.
And the Crusaders did that.
And the Crusaders did that. Now, they also set up increasingly thoughtful and complex understandings of what it meant, what you had to work on before, during, and after wars. Now, what I'd like for you to do for just a few minutes, turn to your nearest neighbor and pull and identify at least one condition or reason that you too believe would have to be fulfilled in each category for war to be just. So, what would you have to be sure was happening or had happened for you, at least one thing that would justify you and your country going to war? What is one of those that would justify you and your country that would keep the war that you're in just while you're fighting? And what is one after hostilities are over? Whether they're over by a ceasefire, you winning or you losing, for the war to have been just. Got it? Go.
I guess.
Sorry to worry you've been attacked. One thing in each of these conditions that we believe has to be met to be able to conduct this war. Yeah, somebody attacked us. Let's see what, at the beginning of the war, during the war, at the end of the war. Somebody attacked me.
Excuse me, I'm sorry.
For you to engage in war.
Come up with one,
Somebody attacked me. That's the only one.
just reasons to go.
It doesn't matter. What's the reason that we were attacked?
He just reframed it. Three
Right.
just
Third.
So we don't have to worry about the other two. Just three just reasons to go to war.
Okay. Conduct. What do we do during the conduct?
Purposely. I think
Don't
purposely.
kill prisoners.
In my mind.
Don't
Accident.
mow down prisoners.
But at the same time, whose idea is
Civilians.
Civilians
City. What do you want me to put down there? Collateral damage? Don't attack non-combatants.
Yeah.
Just kill non-combatants. Were we supposed to do one on each or three on each? And once hostilities are done,
We should repair or
help repair. That's a way to reconcile, like the Marshall Plan did.
In the back of my mind, I'm deciding that so much.
so do something, establish some kind of a
Economic
agreements.
economic Help repair the damage.
Well, that's the end of
Help repair damage. Not only to maintain order, but to in the mental facilities. You know, I mean, to this day, we're still fighting over civil wars in this country.
Anybody not finished?
Okay.
Okay, let's pull it together. Let's pull it together. All right. Let's start with these three, or four or five. I think you all make yourselves five. What are just reasons to go to war? And if you want to add what would make it not just that's briefly, that would be okay. What is the just reason to go to war?
Ed, go ahead. What is the just reason to go to war?
And it's love your neighbor.
Huh?
Love your neighbor.
But why would you go to war?
Okay.
Adam had a really good point that if they're killing children and doing it purposely, that would be a just reason to go to war.
Okay. Okay,
That's Putin's favorite.
let me see if this will work.
They're killing young children. They're not
Oh.
That's the misinformation.
Correct.
I think John found a marker, Wiley.
Huh?
John found a marker.
Okay.
A better marker, yeah, that's why I got that. Should be darker, I think.
Correct an injustice to others. Now you have to watch that.
Yes, you do, that's what Putin uses.
Because
That's not good.
nations
Oh,
tend
better.
to exaggerate and even falsify those happenings in order to do what they want to do. And you've got to ask, are there mixed motives here? Are our claims against our enemies just, or are they exaggerated? Or, excuse me, are they fabricated?
I don't know if you all heard, but I had some Ukrainians staying with me recently, and they were Eastern Ukrainians, and they were saying that a lot of what we read in the media is false, that what had happened historically for 8 years, the nationalist Ukrainians had been attacking the Eastern Ukrainians and causing pretty much the same situation at that time for them as happening now. So they were hiding in basements, they were, you know, so I think what I got from this is we always have to question and not take everything that we read and hear for the word, the truth.
Absolutely. Oh, somebody else give us another one.
You've been attacked. You've been attacked.
You've been attacked.
So you fight back.
So defense. You have been, and notice John said, have been attacked. Not just you think you might be attacked.
That's another deception.
But have been attacked.
I don't want to discuss, but I just want to put this out there, this thought. Going to back what Ed and Margaret have been talking about, Putin starts everything, and he's got it even in our own media. They're going after your children. They're going after unborn babies, which is, there's no such thing. Okay? They're the cabal about, oh, Hillary and the pizza, whatever it was. they're abusing children. That all starts with a person who's been in what used to be the KGB, counterintelligence, putting that stuff out all over the world. Just to that point, that's all. Just a bit of information.
Okay?
That's his
Good.
favorite.
So we're talking about to correct an injustice, and it has to be a clear, overwhelming injustice. Some of you remember the Tonkin Gulf incident.
Yeah.
Do you?
Yes. Yeah.
We found out later, American public found out later, that really wasn't an unprovoked attack by the North Vietnamese. We went to war because our nation wanted to go to war, or our leaders wanted to go to war for other reasons, and we masked it with a reason that worked.
Is that weapons of mass destruction that we didn't find?
Oh yeah.
Yes. Yes. That whole claim of weapons of mass destruction, you're right.
Yeah.
Just wasn't there.
So should we wait to be attacked? I mean, do we have to have an actual attack rather than we think we're going to be attacked?
Good question. And you've got to deal with that, but you've got to deal with that honestly. It has to be a clear situation and a clear injustice. What are some others? What are some others? There's a big one here.
I like the one that says, there's a time to heal, a time to kill, a time for war, and a time for peace.
I couldn't agree. Could anybody else interpret to me?
There is a time to heal, a time to kill, a time for war, and a time for peace.
Okay, that is definitely a justification for just war. But what about, this is a big one for all thinkers of this time, and one that is part of the list of just reasons. Last resort. Last resort. We don't go to war as our first option. We go to war after exhausting the other options available and really trying to do it. You can see part of this in the Ukrainian situation as our administration and the Ukrainians are having to take more steps, but they have gone through ways of not going to war before they did it. Is it a lesser evil than the alternatives? Is it a lesser evil than the alternatives?
If that's you don't know.
Sometimes, but you've got to think about that. You've got to really think about that. Were reasonable, non-military alternatives exhausted?
Sanctions.
Or was the judgment to take military action premature? Read the article to Putin in the paper.
Wiley, I'm thinking about World War II.
Yeah.
They just bombed Pearl Harbor. That was immediate.
Yes.
There's no resort. No other things.
Yeah, you had to respond to that because you had been attacked clearly. What's interesting, though, is that most students of war history say that the peace from World War I, the punitive peace, brought Hitler to power and spawned World War II.
How's that?
That's the third one.
Because Hitler would not have come to power if the Weimar Republic had been allowed to help Germany recover socially, economically, and so forth from World War I. Think of the contrast between the Marshall Plan and World War I. Also think of the contrast between the Marshall Plan and World War II and the divvying up of the Middle East and Eastern Europe between the victors without regard for their own territorial and cultural imperatives, and what that caused. It tainted World War II. The peace tainted World War II also. This sounds arcane. This sounds up in the sky. This is practical stuff.
But if the victor is perceived as a bully, you get resistance building in the conquerors.
Okay.
And it comes back to bite.
Okay, another one here is, I'm sorry, but we're rightful intentions. We've been talking about some of them.
Is the road to hell paved with those?
Huh?
Yeah.
Is the road
Is the road to hell paved with those rightful intentions?
Well, yes.
Darn right.
The just war folks, the theorists and the theologians say, you don't go to war to gain power. You don't go to war to gain land. You don't go to war to exterminate other peoples. You don't go to war because the other guys have a different religion from you. You can defend your country, your people, others' liberty and independence, prevent extermination of a race or cultural people, but you don't go to war to gain access to foreign oil preserves. And if mixed motives, like foreign oil preserves, humiliating our enemies, establishing our U.S. military superiority in a region, distract from the rightful justification, you need to be very, very careful. There is one last critical one that how do you do, who decides to go to war?
Your leader.
Huh?
Your leader in whatever form that is.
Originally, it was supposed to be the Congress that decided what in our country that was supposed to, and somehow that's got changed because of the deceptions occurred with the second invasion that we went into in the Mideast, the second invasion of Iraq, because they had an agenda. They were worried about our economy and what oil would do to it, so they manufactured stuff. But
so the leaders, whoever has decision-making authority, does it, but they do it in consultation not unilaterally, with their advisors and honest advisors. Now, the prime summary here for going to war, a key, is restoring or establishing a just peace. Just wars are to establish or restore peace.
Does that mean having a well thought out exit strategy?
Definitely, but the exit strategy isn't just how do we get out of here. It's how we bring the world or this area or this nation closer to a positive peace.
Yes, and the word exit not necessarily meaning leaving if two countries were right next to each other, but exit meaning ending.
Now, another one is, and I'm not going to spend much time on this, reasonable probability of success as you have defined it according to these terms.
Does anybody enter into a war with that in mind?
I think right now, and this is a continuing question, these questions, as we've said, continue through all further. Ukraine is having to consider, and so is the United States, and so are our allies having to consider, what is success in Ukraine? And is that success achievable? If it is not achievable, and this is hard to say, if it is not achievable, then maybe we shouldn't be at war. If we know that we cannot succeed,
But
don't go to war.
is a just peace the same for both sides? Sometimes we want to put our interpretation of what is a just peace in a place where that's not recognized.
Exactly, and that we'll go into that. It looks like probably next time. But we've only talked about going to war and kind of sidelining some others today. We will plan next time to deal with conduct of war during hostility. How do we conduct war and how we make we not conduct war? And how do we deal with your question, Joanne? How do we deal with the question of peace? What are the considerations that determine peace? And I want to remind you now, we've been talking about nations. I'm asking you to think about your life with your family, with your neighbors, with your friends. How many of you have been divorced? All right. Was that a just war or not? And in what way? I'm not asking you to tell us.
We didn't go to war.
But, or was it total war? Like, everyone agrees that the so-called Civil War was a horrible example of total war, not just war, on both sides. how do you keep divorce from being total war? How do you make it just war? My son and his wife are going through a divorce right now. And they are both really striving and using mediation as a way to restore the lives of each of them and their son. And both of them really want to do that. But oh boy, the temptations of prematurely running to the lawyers and letting the two junkyard dogs fight it out.
Lawyers love that.
So we're really thinking about something that applies to our lives as Christians here. How do Christians witness to God's love and justice even in the midst of personal war as well as national war? Can we pray together, please? It'll take me just a second to get to the prayer that I want to use, I need to use. Okay. Lord, thank you for leading us in hard paths. Give us the wisdom, commitment, love, and patience to live faithfully as disciples of the risen Christ, in whose name we pray. Amen. Thank you.